Hey, what can you tell us about this interview, this day that Harbaugh spent with the Vikings yesterday?
Yeah, Greeny, I think that it kind of came down to a difference of opinion about what Wednesday was supposed to be. Sources close to the situation telling me that Jim Harbaugh went into Minnesota with the impression that this was his job to take, that he had been preparing for this interview as if he was going to be the next head coach of the Vikings. And Minnesota didn't see it this way. That was, in their opinion, this was a true interview, just the exact same way they had done the day before when Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants, was brought into Minnesota. The Vikings followed the exact same format that they did with Graham, that they with Jim Harbaugh. And I think during the day he kind of realized, okay, this is a real interview. It's not a slam dunk that I'm going to get this. And you have to look at the optics of this. Interviewing on National Signing Day, he thought he was going to Minnesota. And the Vikings had four candidates. He was a finalist, emerged late in the mix because of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, the new general manager. Their ties in San Francisco are noted, and they run pretty deep. But he was a late add into this, and I just think that the Vikings never saw this as, okay, come to Minnesota, sign the contract, it's yours. They wanted to vet this. They wanted to make sure he was the right fit for the quarterback, the culture, and the long-term fit for this franchise. And I just don't think that they saw eye to eye on all that.
So that's interesting. There's two separate pieces to this. There's the optics of it from a college standpoint. I agree with you. We're going to talk to Heather and Paul about that a little later. In the meantime, whatever the misunderstanding was, I assume he still could have gotten this job. So why didn't he? Regardless of what the expectation on the Vikings side of it was when it began, why didn't he wind up getting the job?
Well, I think that you can't deny that he's the most successful of the four candidates, just given he brought the San Francisco 49ers to three NFC championships and a Super Bowl in his first three seasons there. But big picture wise, and looking at this entire situation from like a 30,000-foot view, the Vikings wanted to make sure that this is a culture shift, that he would fit into that, considering where they were the last 8 years under Mike Zimmer and how Jim Harbaugh, a Jim Harbaugh led team, would help this team, A, stay competitive, but B, be a culture where everyone felt like they can be collaborative. All the buzzwords that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah had brought up last week at his introductory press conference, that those two things would meld. And on top of that, too, Jim Harbaugh would be very, very expensive. Like, that's the thing that we need to factor in here. He's already been in the NFL, and I think that would have been a financial constraint for the Wilf family that I don't know if that was a commitment they were willing to make.
All right, fascinating. Courtney, thank you very much. Outstanding work, and we'll keep you close by as that continues to develop. Again, we believe we know who their new coach is going to be, and that'll be Kevin O'Connell. But Graziano, let me come to you on that. How does now all the leading up to this interview, and I apologize for none of it, we assumed that if he was willing to do this as publicly as he was doing it on National Signing Day, we had the same assumption he did. This had to be a job that was his for the taking. So what went wrong here?
Well, look, Courtney is all over this. Like she's absolutely right. The Vikings saw Jim Harbaugh as a candidate. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah wanted to interview him, wanted to see if they could bring him in and get everybody to agree that he was the best candidate, but it did not work out that way for reasons that Courtney did an excellent job outlining. So, yeah, I think we tried to temper expectations a little bit going into this yesterday and the days before, because what we were being told was, don't assume this. Don't assume he's the leading candidate. Don't assume he's going to get the job. And obviously that turned out to be the case. I think what we've learned from this is NFL teams don't necessarily see Jim Harbaugh as the slam dunk, if he's interested in us, we have to have him candidate, which I think a lot of people may have assumed that he was. I don't think that means he's never coaching in the NFL again. It's certainly possible. It seems like he wants to, but it's not a sure thing that if Jim Harbaugh is interested in your NFL job, that you're automatically going to give it to him.
Well, that's right. And look, there were 9 openings at the beginning of this cycle. To the best of our knowledge, this is the only one that got even close, and that includes Miami, where he's got all the ties to the owner, who obviously has a heaping helping of other problems that we'll get to in a minute. But if he's telling Michigan, as Shefty reports, that he's coming back, that's it. It's one and done as far as this. Bartholomew, what gives here?
Yeah.
Does he look bad in this? It's a strange story in the big picture.
Of course he does. It's nothing like when the plug doesn't come through. So you talk about having a synergy between the general manager and the head coach. The NFL is about relationships. That's why when in New York, that's why Dayball was the front candidate. And, I think he emerged because they wanted a candidate. But you have to think, a lot of the characteristics that Harbaugh and his coaching style has is similar to what they just had in Zimmer. Not saying that they're the same person, but you talk about an old school type of mentality. You talk about collaboration, right? That's something that, he was alleged not to really do well in San Francisco when he exited. So you talk about bringing in a guy like Kevin O'Connell, who was a teammate of mine, a teammate of Damon Woody's. He's been a coaching candidate for a couple of years, and he fits all the criteria of these new young quarterbacks that are familiar with the new style of playing. And Kirk Cousins is a guy that's not a young quarterback needs development. He's a guy that needs collaboration.
Give me a thought on this, D. Wood.
Yeah, listen, it's definitely a slap in the face, Greeny. Imagine all the other coaches, particularly Ryan Day at Ohio State. This is just, you're talking about an alley-oop. Like John Morant, this is an alley-oop right here for those guys to use as material on the recruiting trail, moving forward. When your head coach is going out there on National Signing Day and interviewing for the job and didn't get the job, man, that's just going to be fodder for everyone else. I definitely agree with that. And what Bart talked about with Kevin O'Connell, listen, I think also people want a piece of that Sean McVay coaching tree.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.